Okay, in this video I'll be covering the debuff section of Silmaril. If you've seen the previous videos with healing or enhancing, it is very similar. Specifically, enhancing, reason being, is it's going to use your priority lists. You're going to have your high, normal, and low priorities. You can enable them, and just like before, you can move them around. So you can move your paralysis into high priority and so forth. So again, throughout the program, the theme is really prioritization. So you can have the maximum control over what your healer, enhancer, even DPS does. If you want them to use a job ability before a weapon skill, if you want to use a weapon skill, and then later, use a job ability when not busy, doing a skill chain. So that's like I said, it's a running theme. It's going to be prevalent throughout all these sections. So debuff should be really quick. Like I said, it's very similar, right? So just like healing has an auto party option, debuff has an auto party option, and if you did configure these priorities and you set it up, sometimes like for instance, you're just like, oh, I just want auto. Don't worry about it, right? It's just automatically remove all the buffs on everybody. Sometimes that doesn't make sense, right? Does the scholar really need to be worried about blind? Does my monk need to really worry about silence? It doesn't really make um, a lot of sense. So if you have the luxury of a Yag Rush, an easy content, you can just check the box and call it a day. But if you're doing something like Odyssey, like a goal fight where like every little last spell that you cast counts, I would recommend spending the time in tuning, right? So that's one thing that this allows you to do is do a little bit of tuning, right? So maybe you're like, oh, nope, my monk, I can't have like HP down, right? Or something. And a mob does a move constantly. I don't know where HP down is. Or it's probably hit. Oh, yeah, it's high priority. Right. So then you could do something like that. I don't know. I mean, so you can not only tailor the buffs, but who gets them first, right? Because not every time you have a Yag Rush, like on a Scholar or something. So that's important. No different there. As for the debuffs, again, it's just like enhancing. You have to set them by player, right? So, I mean, I have these select all, so you don't have to click all of them, and an unselect all. Um, typically I'll just go through, and this is in my situation here. Turin is a monk. For on a monk, I don't really care about silence. I don't really care about Addle necessarily. And a lot of content, I don't care about the dots. In fact, I sometimes welcome them for things like Dynamis, right? So I don't have to worry about sleeps all the time, or at least helps with sleeps. So it's pretty quick, like I said, you can, tune them. Like, I don't want dots taken out because I like them. And then, this is like a bard, right? So I'm going to want to leave the silence enabled because I want the singing, and this particular player, I want them all. In this example, this is a scholar, so I really don't care about blindness. You get the idea, right? So that's why you set them by person. Now, if you set the auto, yeah, you don't get a choice, right? Because it's just going to automatically remove all debuffs for the entire party. Currently, there's not an alliance. But that'll probably happen when I do the buffs, right? Because once I start tracking out of party buffs, I can then do the debuffs along with enhancing. So that's not supported, right? So if you have another party with a bunch of dooms, pretty sure you can cast Curse now outside of your party. Yeah, there you go. It's not supported. Not yet, anyway. But like I said, this is pretty straightforward. But I just, for sake of consistency, I want to make a video of it. Hopefully, clear up some issues. And just like in priority, you need to make sure you sort them. As an example, I'll just load my Odyssey priority for my Scholar, for instance. So this is just now that we've gotten a couple layers deep in configuration, you can kind of see Scholar. Yes, it has Curaga because that's how you do the session. I didn't mention that in the cure section, but that is how you get the Curaga to work on Scholar. Is you need to actually configure. I'm sorry. A session cure 4 is how you, in order to get Scholar to use a session cure 4, you have to enable it under Curaga and the job abilities, of course. So in this case, it's hard to explain all that stuff, but basically, Cures turns it into Curaga with a session, but in order to set that up, you're going to have to enable Curaga. So even though I'm on a Scholar, I'm only going to do it a session cure 3 and cure 4, right? I don't want to waste a stratagem on there. But um, that's I just saw that there because like some people might not be intuitive. It's not because she has a sub job of white mage; she's sub job red mage. But so cure, I mean, it's a little bit slower because you got to use a job ability. But so you can look at the priorities list, right? Curaga is always going to be above cure. I'm going to follow in case I'm out of range. See all our job abilities, and then personally, I do debuffs before buffs. Generally, that's a better practice, especially if you have like a slow that precludes you getting haste. There's different levels of slow. Some can overwrite, some can't. I don't. There's some. It's not straightforward with the buff IDs, at least that I found. There will probably be in the future when I add some more things to this is the auras, right? So you have sometimes an aura, and when I get a chance to it, I look more into it where it'll be an auto detect. So because you always have that annoying situation in like dynamics, you keep trying to remove your like slow on your wave 2 boss, right? Because it's a slow aura, and you're racing or it tries to cast haste all the time. It's so those are like geomancy like debuffs, the auras, right? So I remap them. I call them geomancy when I can. But sometimes they're hard to pick up. It'd be really nice if I found an easy spot I could just look at and spend time and look at the buffs and the buff IDs and try to figure out how to way to do that currently. I can't think of any. If you have any, drop a comment, maybe, or post something in Discord, and I can try to troubleshoot that, or at least design something to detect auras. But anyway, so that's generally why I'll try to do a debuff before enhancing, because sometimes you can't put enhancing on without the debuff first, and they kind of pair up, right? So I'll do debuff, normal, enhancing, normal, so forth. Medicine, I do put at pretty low. Like auto raids and medicine are kind of lower priority. Some people, I see them bubbling that all the way top. You don't need to do that because if you're silenced, you don't need to worry about it, right? Because it's not going to do any of these actions until you get, down here, because it knows you're silenced. You can't cast a spell, so it's automatically going to use medicine. So you don't really need necessarily, medicine at the very top priority. Does it hurt anything? No, not really. I mean, maybe you're using a remedy if you have it checked for something and you didn't want it, like for instance, slow or gravity, and you missed a cure because they're busy using an item. But generally speaking, I do put items at the lower levels because of how priorities and they fall through. But anyway, that's how I have the debuff laid out in the priority levels. Nothing too crazy. I was lazy. I was just like, it's only myself. Nothing too crazy on the content. I just gonna auto. And I left them all the same, and it does fine. I don't have too much of an issue. If I spent more time on it, I certainly would tweak it a little bit. But that's an example of a fully, I'd say, relatively fully configured player and debuffs. Super easy. It literally is just enable and then check these 3 boxes. That's it. But there's tons of customization if you want to get to that level. So that's all I want to talk about debuffs. Like I said, you got any questions, comments, go ahead and just drop it in the Discord.